Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Presta Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Prajane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Bhaskachyadeshtane Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivas Adi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vanchkaptribhyascha kripa sindhubhyevacha, Patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Anant Koti Vaishnav Vrinda ki, Gaur Premanande. All right then, yes. So, here we go now. It's the last section from verse 16 to verse 20. Last section of the 15th chapter. And it's really got some really quite striking sort of perspectives on the whole message of Bhagavad Gita. And this, particularly this chapter really, Purushottam Yoga, the yoga of the Supreme Person. So, you know, it's even arguable that this section begins with the second part of verse 15, because it's Vedic. It's talking about Vedic considerations. And these last verses are talking about Vedic conceptions and considerations, whereas in the other section, there was talk about how Krishna is in the sun and the moon. And Krishna is doing different things, doing all sorts of different things, which are essential to our existence. He's supporting the planets. He's digesting our food for us. And the light of the sun comes from him, and all that. And then in verse 15, the first part, Krishna says, I'm seated in everyone's heart, and from me comes remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. So again, these are essential factors in life in this world. And that's really the focus of that section, from verse 12 to the first half of 15. And then the second half of 15, by all the Vedas I'm to be known. Indeed, I'm the compiler of Vedanta, and I'm the knower of the Vedas. This is all connecting up with these verses we're going to read now. This last section, verse 16 to verse 20. Yeah. Anyway, we felt to not divide verses in half between sections. So, but I just thought I'd mention that. So now the thing is here, well, as the heading, the title of the section is saying, the three shloka Bhagavad Gita, summarizing the Vedas and Vedanta. So, in other words, here Lord Krishna, and he's already mentioned it at the end of the purport. I'm going to read that bit actually, because I didn't actually read it last night. I should have. Krishna now explains some of the, well, in fact, it's really interesting and it's very profound. He simultaneously is describing the stages of a person's development as a devotee, as well as simultaneously the three features of the absolute truth, Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavad. Simultaneously. It's really interesting. And it goes like this. I don't know if you have it in your notes. If not, make a note, because otherwise, later on, you'll find it confusing. Yeah, because it's kind of, caught up. These things are caught up together. But so Lord Krishna then explains Sambandha, Abhideya, and Prayojana. I think you've heard of these stages of devotional service. We even mentioned them last night. Sambandha, the beginning stage of understanding that, I have a relationship with Krishna. And it doesn't mean, your eternal rasa with Krishna, but just that you have a connection with Krishna. That I am not this body, I am the eternal servant of Krishna. So I should live as the servant of Krishna. Yeah, it's more like in that sense of the beginning stages of Krishna consciousness, rather than in the sense of, what is my eternal rasa with the Lord. So that's Sambandha, that I have a relationship with Krishna as his servant, and in that context, as a servant of Krishna, I have a relationship with everything else. Yes. In a nutshell, you could say, I have a relationship with this whole world and everything in it, all the different features and items and things are in this material world. I have a relationship with them in terms of their relationship with Krishna. So what does that mean? Practically, it means I should try to engage everything and everyone as far as possible in Krishna's service, because that's where everything and everyone belongs. They all belong there, at the lotus feet of Krishna. The things are all the paraphernalia of Krishna, the belongings of Krishna. Krishna's earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, false ego, and all the things which are made of those elements. Yeah, they're Krishna's. They belong to Krishna. So my relationship with them is in those terms that you belong to Krishna. If it's some person, you belong to Krishna. Yeah, you may or may not be aware of that, but it's true. So I will relate to you as a servant of Krishna. Means that while you're not a devotee, while you're just a materialist, I will try to preach to you, influence you, try to help you understand. And if you are a devotee, then we'll associate in Krishna consciousness. We'll hear and chant together. We'll discuss about Krishna, about devotional service together. And we will serve together like this. This is what Sambandha means, really, the real idea of it. Not that, do I have a rasa in conjugal, parental, or friendly, or whatever, servitude or neutrality. And then the next one is abhideya, which means putting or acting, living in terms of the relationship. The relationship is, he's my master, I'm his servant, so I will live like that. I will engage in the service of Krishna. That's abhideya. And then prayojana means, after however long engaging in devotional service, then by Krishna's grace, one will enter one's eternal relationship with the Lord. And one will meet Krishna face to face and go back to Godhead. Okay, so now those three things are described as follows. From verse 16 to verse 18, that is sambandha. And you'll see it as we read through the verses. You'll see how everything fits into that context. Then verse 19 is talking about abhideya, the process of devotional service. And number 20 is talking about prayojana, or the perfectional stage, ultimately going back to Godhead, entering one's relationship with the Lord. So that's there. I hope you made a note of that. But now, you see that the heading we've given the section, it begins the 3 shloka Bhagavad Gita. The 3 shloka Bhagavad Gita, not the 5 shloka. No, there's five verses here, of course, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20. But we're saying the 3 shloka Bhagavad Gita, summarizing the Vedic literatures and the Vedanta, and Vedas include Srimad Bhagavatam too. So therefore, it is possible to see, and as we go through, we'll point it out, and I'm sure you'll see it, how verse 16 is talking about Brahman. Verse 17 is talking about Paramatma. And verse 18 is talking about Bhagavan, or Purushottam. Purushottam, the supreme person, even the supreme feature of the supreme person. So Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan, these are the 3 features of the absolute truth. And there's a verse in Bhagavad Gita, in Srimad Bhagavatam, there's a verse, where is it now? Which verse is that? Brahman, Paramatma, Bhagavan?
Second chapter.
I know, second chapter. I know the verse very well. I just want to give the reference. Vedanti, tat va. It's, first canto, chapter 2, verse 11. Vedanti tattva vidas, tattvam yajnanam advayam, brahmeti paramatmeti, bhagavan iti shabjate. That those, well, anyway, the translation I'm looking at here, but let me just go right into the Bhagavatam and just have a look here to get the correct, the sort of normal, usual translation. Learned transcendentalists who know the absolute truth call this non-dual substance Brahman, Paramatma, or Bhagavan. So the absolute truth has these three features. Yeah. Okay, so now, an interesting little point, by the way, this is just by the way actually, is that in Srimad Bhagavatam, there is what is called the Paribhas Sutra. It means the essential definitive verse of the Bhagavatam, which is making it very clear what is the subject matter and what is the message of Srimad Bhagavatam. And that verse is 1st Canto, Chapter 3, verse 28. Anyway, that verse. How does that verse begin? Huh? Ete Chamsa Kalapam Sa Krishna Stu Bhagavan Swayam. Yeah. That there are many forms of the Lord and partial forms, but Krishna is the original form. Right. That's the essential definitive verse. What is the Bhagavatam about? It's about Krishna. But this other verse we just read, 1 to 11, that is pointed to as being like a secondary Paribhas Sutra. Secondary. It's the main essence of Bhagavatam is Krishna. That's what the 1.3.28 is making the point. Krishna. But then also, Bhagavatam is also about the different aspects of the Absolute Truth, Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. So anyway, So this is all part of the essence of the Vedas. Sambandha Abhidheya Prayojana, the process, and Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan, the different features of the Absolute. Right, so 16, 17, and 18 are describing Brahman in 16, Paramatma in 17, Bhagavan in 18. So let's go through it and you'll see. Okay, so first of all, the first subsection is verses 16, 17, and 18, which are describing, what did I say? In terms of the stages of devotional service, Sambandha. These three verses are describing Sambandha. In terms of the features of the Absolute Truth, they're describing 16 Brahman, 17 Paramatma, 18 Bhagavan. Let's read these verses. 16. There are two classes of beings, the fallible and the infallible. In the material world, every living entity is fallible, and in the spiritual world, every living entity is called infallible. So this is Brahman, in the sense that we are Brahman. We are Brahman. Aham Brahmasmi. This is one of the famous little sutras of Vedanta Sutra. Aham Brahmasmi. Aham, me, I. What am I? Brahmasmi. I am Brahman. Yes. So that's there. Verse 17. Besides these two, there's the greatest living personality, the Supreme Soul, the imperishable Lord himself, who has entered the three worlds and is maintaining them. Right, so this is the Super Soul, of course. This is the Super Soul who has entered the three worlds, material worlds, and is maintaining them. That's definitely Paramatma. But it's also part of Sambandha Gyan because we are here in the three worlds, and we are being maintained by the Supersoul. So that relationship is there. He is maintaining us. We are not maintaining him, and neither are we just independent from him. We have a relationship with him. That's Sambandha in terms of the process, and he's the Supersoul Paramatma in terms of the stages. The phases, features of the Absolute. And then verse 18, because I am transcendental, beyond both the fallible and the infallible, and because I am the greatest, I am celebrated both in the world and in the Vedas as that supreme person. So this is Bhagavan, Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Not just Paramatma, who's just maintaining the material world and the living entities. But this is actually Bhagavan. And not only is it Bhagavan, but you see, the word is used in the Sanskrit. The word is used in verse 18, Purushottama, the supreme person is Krishna. Of course, Krishna and Ram, for example, we can say, and we do say, that they're the supreme person. Krishna's the supreme person. Ram is also, they're kind of equal. But still, Krishna is superior to Ram. Therefore, we find, for example, in Vishnu Sahasranam, there's a verse which explains 1,000 names of Vishnu equals one name of Ram. So, the name and the person are the same. That we know, of course. That the name and the person whose name it is, they are not two, they are one. Right, so if 1,000 names of Vishnu then equals one name of Ram, that means that Ram is 1,000 times more powerful than Vishnu. But then it goes on to say that 3 names of Ram are equal to 1 name of Krishna. This is there. So in other words, Krishna is considerably more powerful than even Lord Ram. What to speak of Lord Vishnu? Right. So this then 18 is talking about Bhagavan and even the supreme feature of Bhagavan, which is Krishna, Purushottama. Okay, so let's get into it now. Let's go back to verse 16. We'll have a look at the purport. 16. There are 2 classes of beings, the fallible and the infallible. In the material world, every living entity is fallible, and in the spiritual world, every living entity is called infallible. So you can see there, Srila Prabhupada begins the purport in an interesting way. Here the Lord is giving, in summary, the contents of the Vedanta Sutra. And the Vedanta Sutra is giving the contents of the entire Vedic scriptures. And Srimad Bhagavatam is explaining what the Vedanta Sutra is about, because otherwise it's very difficult. Yeah. Just like, in some cases, in some senses, and it happens in some cases, that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Prabhupada, he translated and commented on Brahma Samhita into English. But if you don't know English quite well, you may have to get someone to translate his English into English. You know, like a layman's English, a common person's English, because it's high level. So Vedanta Sutra is, it's high level. It's not like that's really the problem. The problem is that in English we would say it is abstruse. It is abstruse. It is, it's often statements are made which are very indirect and using very abbreviated and still complex forms. So it's really hard, it's very vague, actually. It's not like the Bhagavatam, which is very much to the point, straightforward. The Vedanta Sutra is very vague. And because it's vague, then it lends itself to interpretation and speculation. And therefore, the Mayavadis, they love the Vedanta Sutra. They love interpreting it in all sorts of ways, impersonal. Whereas the devotees, there are devotees like Baladev Vijayabhushan who've translated Vedanta Sutra, well, not into English, of course, but they've translated it, but in such ways that you get Vaishnava understandings, which is actually what it means. But then to make it really clear, Vyasadeva did his commentary on Vedanta Sutra, which is Srimad Bhagavatam. It's all about Krishna, because that's really what Vedanta Sutra is about. So, let's see here. At the end of the previous purport, I just want to draw your attention to this. These three stages, Sambandha, Abhideya, and Prayojana, were referred to, and I didn't point it out clearly enough yesterday. Let me just read here it's just right at the end, more or less, of the purport of verse 15. One can attain perfection in three stages. By understanding Vedic literature, one can understand his relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. By performing the different processes, one can approach him, in other words, engaging in devotional service. And at the end, one can attain the supreme goal, who's no other than the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Right, so... so as part of the Sambandha Gyan, relationship of us with Krishna, first of all, and Krishna with us, relationship of us with the material world, as we mentioned, in terms of the material world and our relationships with Krishna, and then our relationships with other living beings, with other living entities. And in this world, of course, Prabhupada goes to some lengths in the purport. Particularly, it's both paragraphs, actually. It's both paragraphs. Prabhupada distinguishes, as he's done many times before in Bhagavad Gita, between the fallible and the infallible. In the material world, every living entity is fallible except those who are advanced devotees. But in the spiritual world, every living entity is infallible, just every single last one. So Prabhupada delineates in different ways the differences between these two. the fallible and the infallible. This is relationship. This is relationship. This is sambandha. Yeah. Prabhupada talks about to explain one thing at least, to distinguish the fallible from the infallible. In the second paragraph, Prabhupada explains how the fallible, all of us here in the material world, we are living within these material bodies, and generally people are identifying with them and living as if they were the bodies. But our bodies go through 6 changes. We're born, we grow, we reproduce, we age, and whatever else, what is it now? Birth, growth, duration, we exist. We're born, we grow, we exist, we reproduce, then we age, we dwindle, and we vanish. So we go through these changes here. Every single one goes through those changes. But in the spiritual world, Prabhupada says, the body does not change. There's no old age. There's no birth. There's no death. You're going to be whoever you are in your eternal position as a eternal perfect devotee. You're going to be like that forever in the spiritual world, because it's just what you are. Right, so interesting little point. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur comments that as Krishna, as if Krishna is speaking, because I am the knower of the Vedas, I will speak in brief the essential meaning of all the Vedas in these 3 verses. Please listen, including this verse. In these 3 verses. Yes, so the process, sambandha, that part of the process is there. Our relationships with each other, particularly. Brahman, and then Brahman. We are Brahman. As eternal spirit souls, we are Brahman. That particular feature of the absolute truth, that term can be used for us. Okay, verse 17. Besides these 2, there's the greatest living personality, the Supreme Soul, the imperishable Lord Himself, who has entered the 3 worlds and is maintaining them, as we said. And you can see it's obvious. This is definitely the Super Soul. It's definitely not us. But it's not Bhagavan. It's not Krishna from Vrindavan himself. It's his expansion. Right, so this is Sambandha Gyan of our relationship with the Lord. We're being maintained by Him. And the world and everything in it which we're involved with is all coming from Him, maintained by Him. That's relationship. So, and in terms of the different aspects of the absolute truth, Brahman, Paramatma, Bhagavan, as we said, it's Paramatma. Right. So Srila Prabhupada says, Prabhupada refers to Katha and Shweta Ashvata Upanishads in the purport. Nityo Nityanam Chaitanas Chaitananam. You can see that line is there. And there's another line afterwards, which isn't quoted here, but Prabhupada quotes it often. Eko Bahunam Yovadadati Kaman. Nityo, there's one eternal living entity. Nityanam, then there's many eternal living entities. Chaitanas means living entity. So there are 2 categories. One category has 1 member. The other category has unlimited members, actually. And Eko, the one, Bahunam, Yo Vidadati Kaman. Kaman means the desires. Vidadati, fulfilling. The one has been fulfilling the desires of the Bahunam, the many, since time immemorial. That's the super soul. Right, so anyway, Prabhupada says, the purport is that amongst all the living entities, both conditioned and liberated, there is one supreme living personality, the supreme personality of Godhead, who maintains them and gives them all the facility of enjoyment according to different work, according to their karma, of course. So a thing is, that this is the particular characteristic at least mentioned here, which distinguishes Paramatma from the fallible and even the infallible jivas. Yeah. It distinguishes him even from the infallible, as they are not maintaining the three worlds. They're definitely not doing that. They are not pervading the three worlds and in this way maintaining them and maintaining us. He is maintaining them also and us. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by stating that Supreme Personality of Godhead is situated in everyone's heart as Paramatma. A wise man who can understand him is eligible to attain perfect peace, not others. Okay, verse 18. Because I'm transcendental, beyond both the fallible and the infallible, and because I am the greatest, I am celebrated both in the world and in the Vedas as that supreme person, the Paramatma, the Purushottama, So this is in terms of the features of the Absolute. This is clearly talking about Bhagavan, and even about Sri Krishna himself, who is the highest aspect of Bhagavan, higher than the other personalities, who can certainly correctly be referred to as forms of Bhagavan. Like we mentioned Lord Ram, Lord Nrsingadev, Matsya, Kurlama, Varaha. These are not Paramatma. These are all forms of Bhagavan. But they're not on the level of Krishna. He's higher. He's the original. So therefore he's Purushottama, the ultimate person. So Krishna uses the term Purushottam to distinguish himself, even from the Paramatma from verse 17, and also to help us understand our relationship, our sambandha with him, not just with the super soul who's maintaining the material world, but we also have relationship with Krishna who's in the spiritual world. So it's the last verse about sambandha. It's the last verse about sambandha. Prabhupada, first paragraph, there are 3 paragraphs in the purport. And Prabhupada in the first paragraph emphasizes how Krishna is greater. How Krishna is greater than anyone and everyone, and just how he's the greatest. It's not mentioned here, but there's an interesting word in Sanskrit which Prabhupada uses, and it appears here and there in our literatures. It's the word asamurdva, which means no one is equal to Krishna and no one is greater than Krishna. even other forms of himself are not equal to Krishna. Right. That's asamurdva. The second paragraph, Prabhupada refers to the word loke. Loke, just have a look here, loke. Etosmi loke vede cha. Yeah. Loke. The word loke, Prabhupada's explaining, and it's actually, it's a point which is made by both Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Srila Baladev Vijayabhushan, our main commentators on Bhagavad Gita. They both make the same point, that the word loke can be taken to mean in the Smriti scriptures. Smriti means like Bhagavad Gita, the Puranas, including Srimad Bhagavatam. Yeah. That the purpose of the Vedas is explained in those scriptures, not, well, shall we say, more than in the four Vedas. The four Vedas, they're basically the Karma Kandiya section. They are Shruti. But then there's a second section of the Vedic literatures which is called the Smriti, and that includes the historical literatures, Itihasas, Ramayana, Mahabharata, includes all the Puranas, including Srimad Bhagavatam, and there's also Upa Puranas, secondary Puranas. So they are Smriti. And they even, the Sanskrit they use is somewhat different grammatically from the Sanskrit of the four Vedas. Yeah, so this point is being made here. We should try and get this point. That loke, that word loke, is being taken to mean or to refer to the Smriti scriptures, that part of the Vedic literatures, as distinct from the Shruti, the four Vedas, because the Smriti, particularly like Mahabharata, particularly Bhagavad Gita from Mahabharata, then the Puranas, and particularly Srimad Bhagavatam, which is one of the Puranas, the last one, they are specifically pointing out Krishna and our relationship with him, how we have to reawaken that, live in our relationship with Krishna, become pure devotees and go back to Godhead. It's a slightly technical point, but it's an important one. Right, so then, in the last paragraph, Prabhupada's pointing out mainly how Paramatma is the localized aspect of Bhagavan. Yeah, Bhagavan is higher. All right. So, okay. So that's Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. And that's the description of Sambandha in terms of the development of devotion, of Krishna consciousness. I hope you're with me. Now let's go on to verse 19, which we said, now it's no longer dealing with Sambandha, and it's particularly dealing with Abhideya, with the process. Okay, that's verse 19. Whoever knows me as the Supreme Personality of Godhead without doubting is the knower of everything. He therefore engages himself in full devotional service to me, O son of Bharata. Yeah, so it's about service to Bhagavan. So in other words, in terms of reference to the different features and aspects of the Absolute Truth, this is also continuing the discussion about Bhagavan, Krishna as Purushottam. So, and it's interesting, you may note that in the verse in the Sanskrit, Lord Krishna again refers to himself as what? As Purushottama. Yeah. So there is, in terms of the stages of our development of Krishna consciousness, the point here is that the result of sambandha, the result of understanding our relationship with Krishna and all the other relationships with Krishna, is that we'll become inspired. Yes, I must serve him. Yeah, and that's what's happening here. Anyone who knows him like that through sambandha will take to devotional service. Okay. So Srila Prabhupada notes that there are many speculations about the constitutional positions of the living entities and the Supreme Absolute Truth. But here the Lord just makes it clear that anyone who knows him to be the Supreme Lord, they know everything. They get everything clear. And then their life becomes transformed by that. They become devotees. They become pure devotees through engaging in full devotional service. And Prabhupada makes the point this is confirmed. It's confirmed here and there. We must hear a point here and there in Bhagavad Gita and the Vedic literatures. In the second paragraph, again, Prabhupada's emphasizing hearing. We need to hear. If we don't hear, we'll never know about Krishna. Yes. Yeah. And another interesting little point, and it's not so little actually, in the third line of the Sanskrit, the word bhajati mam is used. Renders devotional service unto me. I don't know if you remember, but in the 6th chapter, verse 47, the last verse, the word bhajati also appears. And Srila Prabhupada goes to some lengths to explain that this does not mean just like to worship in a ceremonial, ritualistic, formal way. Because oftentimes people take the word to mean like that. But the root is bhaj. And bhaj means ultimately to render devotional service to the Lord in a mood of love. Yeah. So, okay. So that's pointed out in the third paragraph here. Well, in paragraph 2, Prabhupada's talking about how we have to hear, and he makes the point, Prabhupada, he has sometimes this tongue-in-cheek type of sense of humor. In the second paragraph, Prabhupada says it's if we read it's the third sentence, here Krishna distinguishes everything very nicely, and one should hear from the source, Krishna and his representatives. Simply to hear like the hogs is not sufficient. One must be able to understand from the authorities. And we shouldn't just speculate academically. All right. And then in the last paragraph there, Prabhupada makes the point, there's no need, we don't need to do anything other than engage in devotional service. And hearing is, of course, a form of devotional service. Hearing, chanting, we can just engage in all the different processes of devotional service. So, in other words, Prabhupada makes the point here, there's no need for any other spiritual process if one has come to devotional service. If one's come to devotional service, it means he's already come to the point, like the ultimate point, because he's engaged in the devotional service of the Lord. He's ended all preliminary processes of understanding. All right, now we have a question here for you devotees doing Bhakti Shastri based on this verse 19. And we're referring here to Caitanya Charitamrita Madhya Lila chapter 6, verse 82 purport. Madhya Lila 6:82 purport. One should understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead only through the evidence presented by the Shastras and the Mahajans. In any case, one must have the mercy of the Lord in order to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead by devotional service. So the question is, citing a purport, referring to a purport that was mentioned in class about knowing the Supreme Personality of Godhead through devotional service, one should understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead only through the evidence presented by what? And the who? By the Shastras and the Mahajans. In any case, one must have the mercy of the Lord to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead by devotional service. So the answers are Shastras, Mahajans, and devotional service. Okay, so here now is the last verse, 20, which is talking about prayojana, coming to perfection. Verse 20, this is the most confidential part of the Vedic scriptures, O sinless one, and it is disclosed now by me. Whoever understands this will become wise, and his endeavors will know perfection. Perfection, pure love of God, going back to Godhead. That's what he's going to get. So this verse summarizes the whole chapter, really. Prabhupada begins the purport. The Lord clearly explains here that this is the substance of all revealed scriptures, and one should understand this as it's given by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So in verses 16 to 19, Lord Krishna has fulfilled his statement from verse 15. Did you catch that? Verses 16 to 19, in those verses, Krishna has fulfilled his statement in verse 15, which said, by all the Vedas am I to be known. Indeed, I am the compiler of Vedanta, and I am the knower of the Vedas. So to conclude the chapter, Srila Prabhupada gives a very interesting summary of the whole chapter at the end of the purport. I'm just going to read it. It'll take just 1 to 2 minutes. While one is performing devotional service in the association of pure devotees in full Krishna consciousness, there are certain things which require to be vanquished altogether. The most important thing one has to surmount is weakness of the heart. The first fall down is caused by the desire to lord it over material nature. Thus one gives up the transcendental loving service of the Supreme Lord. The second weakness of the heart is that as one increases the propensity to lord it over material nature, he becomes attached to matter and the possession of matter. The problems of material existence are due to these weaknesses of the heart. In this chapter, the first 5 verses describe the process of freeing oneself from these weaknesses of the heart. And the rest of the chapter, from the 6th verse through the end, discusses Purushottam Yoga. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports to the 15th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavad Gita in the matter of Purushottama Yoga, the yoga of the Supreme Person. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.